Have you ever just paused to really marvel at something like a hummingbird hovering? Or, the incredible way light works inside your own eye?
Or even just a single nerve cell in your brain?
Yeah.
The complexity is just mind-boggling.
Exactly. It all feels so profoundly well designed, doesn't it?
It does. And intuition is really powerful.
And it starts this really fundamental question. How do we even start to explain something so complex, something that looks so purposefully built without, bringing in the idea of a conscious designer?
That's the heart of it, isn't it? That feeling of design. It's the mystery that thinkers, scientists, theologians have wrestled with for ages.
Yeah.
And it's not a trivial feeling. William Paley, back in the 18th century, he put it so clearly with his famous argument from design. We'll definitely dig into that.
Okay.
And that huge puzzle is exactly what we're diving into today. Our mission, really, in this deep dive is to take an intellectual journey right into that question of apparent design in nature.
And our guide.
Our main source is a really rich one. The introduction and the first 11 chapters of Richard Dawkins' landmark book, The Blind Watchmaker.
Okay, so that's a quest. We're aiming to unpack how life's amazing complexity really came about. And maybe challenge some of our gut feelings about chance and what design even means biologically.
Exactly. So what's the plan?
Well, first, we need to tackle what biological complexity actually is. Get beyond just saying it's not random.
Right.
Then we'll really get into Darwin's big idea, cumulative selection. How that offers a totally different and pretty compelling alternative to older views.
And we'll look at how things that seem like impossible miracles might actually be explainable. When you factor in immense timescales and, frankly, a better grasp of probability than our brains are used to.
Which means examples.
Yeah.
Lots of cool examples from nature, right?
Oh, absolutely. We're talking bat sonar, incredible stuff there, right down to the universal genetic language that connects literally all life.
Yeah.
And importantly, we also need to look critically at some common misunderstandings and, alternative theories that sound plausible, but don't really hold up when you scrutinize them scientifically.
So why should you, our listener, care about all this? Well, look, it's not just a biology lesson, though you'll definitely get some amazing biology.
Definitely.
It's more about shifting how you see things, expanding your sense of what's possible, maybe getting a feel for huge numbers and deep time things we don't usually encounter.
It really gives you a robust way to understand the living world. You start seeing that blind watchmaker everywhere.
Yeah, prepare for some serious aha moments, hopefully. Okay, let's dive in. The fundamental challenge, explaining design without a designer.
Right, the paradox. As I mentioned, William Paley nailed the problem back in 1802 in his Natural Theology.
Watch analogy.
That's the one. He says, imagine you're walking on a heath, completely empty, and you stumble upon a watch.
Okay.
What do you think? You wouldn't just assume it, grew there or formed by accident.
No way. You'd pick it up, see the springs, the cogs, all working together?
Precisely. All perfectly interconnected for a clear purpose. Telling time. Paley's conclusion, obvious. It must have had a watchmaker, an intelligence that designed it.
And then he takes that leap.
He does. He says, look, if a watch implies a watchmaker, then what about living things, like the human eye?
Mm-hmm.
Infinitely more complex, more dynamic than any watch.
By the same logic.
By an even stronger logic, he argued.
Right.
It must imply a divine creator. And it's important, Dawkins actually gives Paley credit here.
Really?
Yeah, he admires Paley's passion, his clarity in framing the problem. He saw Paley as setting up the ultimate challenge that Darwin eventually answered.
But Paley got the answer wrong.
Completely wrong, according to Dawkins. Paley's analogy, comparing a telescope to an eye, or a watch to an organism, it breaks down when you think about how they came to be.
How so?
A human watchmaker has foresight. They plan. They design towards a future goal. Nature doesn't work like that.
Right, and that's the core of the blind watchmaker concept, isn't it? Darwin's big insight.
Absolutely. Natural selection is the blind watchmaker. It's an unconscious process, automatic.
No plan, no purpose, no mind guiding it.
None at all. No foresight. Yet, it's the explanation for the existence and the incredibly purposeful form of all life. The real mystery isn't that it's complex, but the amazing, unguided process that got it there.
And the scale of biological complexity is just hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. Think about, say, the computer Dawkins used maybe 64 kilobytes of information storage.
Okay, sounds tiny now, but yeah.
Now, your brain, maybe 10 million kiloneurons, billions of nerve cells, each connected to thousands of others, a network of unbelievable density.
Wow.
And then go deeper, to the molecular level, every single one of the trillions of cells in your body. It holds about 1,000 times more precisely coded digital information than the entire computer.
1,000 times per cell.
Per cell. So that level of intricate, functional, elegant design, it just cries out for an explanation. The wonder isn't just the complexity, it's how it arose without a plan.
Okay, so if it's not a designer and it's not just pure random luck, how do we pin down what biological complexity actually is? Our first guess might be, it's arranged in a way that's unlikely to have happened by chance alone.
That's a natural starting point, yeah. Think about an airliner like a Boeing 747.
Okay.
Take all its parts, every rivet, wire, seat, wing section, jumble them randomly. What are the odds you accidentally assemble a working 747?
Vanishingly small.
Astronomical.
Exactly. Billions and billions of ways to put the bits together, only a tiny fraction actually fly. And for a human being, even more improbable if you just scrambled the parts.
But hang on, that definition needs work, doesn't it? Because, take Mont Blanc, or just a random scrap heap.
Right.
There are billions of ways to arrange the rocks to make that specific mountain, or the junk to make that specific scrap heap.
Yeah.
The odds of getting that exact arrangement again by chance are also tiny. So why aren't they complex in the same way?
That's the crucial distinction. It's the idea of being specified in advance.
Specified in advance. Yeah. Think of a combination lock, say, with 4,000 odd positions. Any random spin is equally unlikely. But only one combination, maybe 1207, actually opens it. That number, 1207, wasn't just unique afterwards. It was specified by the maker beforehand as the functional one.
Okay, I see. So complex things aren't just unlikely arrangements.
Exactly. They have a quality, a functionality that was, in a sense, specified in advance as being special, something highly unlikely to arise by random chance alone. For living things, Dawkins calls this proficiency.
Proficiency, like the ability to do something well.
Right. To fly, to see, to digest, to reproduce, to survive. That's the quality that demands a special kind of explanation, different from just explaining the arrangement of atoms in a rock or a star. It's the functionality that needs explaining.
And how do we approach explaining that functional complexity? You mentioned a hierarchy.
Yeah, think about explaining a steam engine. An engineer wouldn't start with quantum physics.
Right, they talk about the boiler, the piston, the valves.
Exactly. They explain it in terms of major subcomponents interacting. They kind of temporarily ignore how each individual part works, focusing on the system level.
And then you could ask, okay, but how does the valve itself work?
Precisely. Then you peel down another layer, explain that in terms of simpler parts, springs, levers. You keep doing this, explaining the complex in terms of the slightly less complex, until you reach components so simple you don't need to ask further, like, the basic properties of metal.
So it's layers of explanation.
It highlights the difference between the biologist's job and the physicist's. Physicists deal with ultimate origins, fundamental laws. Biologists explain complex living things in terms of simpler things, aiming eventually to hand off to the physicists.
But biology needs more than just physics.
It uses the laws of physics, absolutely, but it deploys them in a special way. And that special way, the only way known to generate life's complexity, is Darwin's way. Cumulative selection.
Right, cumulative selection.
Right.
So if pure chance, single-step luck is out and a designer is out, this really is the core mechanism. It's not just simple filtering, is it? Not just weeding out the bad stuff.
No, that's absolutely critical. Simple sieving isn't enough. Not by a long shot. Think about hemoglobin, the molecule carrying oxygen in your blood.
Okay.
It's a chain of 146 amino acids. There are 20 types of amino acids available. The number of possible ways to arrange those 146 links is, it's a 1 followed by 190 zeros.
That's incomprehensible. More than atoms in the universe.
Way more. So the chance of hitting a working hemoglobin molecule by sheer luck in one go, forget it. Simple sieving cannot generate that kind of specified order. You need cumulative selection.
And Dawkins made that computer model, the biomorphs, to show this.
He did. It's a brilliant illustration. These are little branching shapes on a computer screen. Their form depends on genes, which are just numbers in the program. The computer simulates mutation, tiny random changes to those numbers. This creates a litter of children, slightly different shapes. Then a human acts as the selector.
You pick the one you like the look of.
Exactly. You choose which one gets to reproduce for the next generation. It's artificial selection, visually demonstrating the cumulative effect.
And it highlights that key point. Bodies don't pass on traits directly. Genes do.
Precisely. The biomorph shape is the body, the phenotype. The numbers are the genes, the genotype. The genes influence how the body develops, the drawing rules, and the body's success, being chosen by you, determines if the genes get passed on. That's why development and reproduction are like watertight compartments. In the model, it prevents Lamarckian inheritance, where changes to the body could directly alter the genes.
And even in that simple model, tracing the evolutionary path is hard.
Incredibly hard. The number of possible biomorphs, even with just 9 genes, is astronomical. Evolution can easily wander off down false trails. It really shows that to get to a specific complex form, like the insect biomorph Dawkins found, you need a specific step-by-step selective path. It doesn't just appear.
Which leads to this idea of genetic hyperspace.
Yeah, imagine a space with, say, 9 dimensions, one for each biomorph gene. Every possible combination of gene values is a point in that space, a unique biomorph. Evolution isn't a jump. It's a slow, step-by-step walk through this vast space.
So the distance between two forms is like the minimum number of steps.
Minimum number of mutational steps, yes. Like if the scorpion and insect biomorphs are 30 mutations apart, that's the quickest possible evolutionary route between them, assuming no wrong turns or backtracking.
And those small steps are key for evolving something incredibly complex, like the eye. You mentioned 2 questions.
Right. First question. Could the human eye just pop into existence in one giant leap, one huge mutation?
The odds seem impossible, like the hemoglobin example.
Exactly. Astronomically against it. Decisively no. But the second question is the crucial one. Could the eye arise from something slightly different from itself?
And the answer there is...
Yes. Absolutely yes, if that difference is small enough.
And that's the magic.
That's the power of cumulative selection. If the step from the eye's immediate predecessor was small and advantageous, then that predecessor could have arisen from something slightly simpler before it, and so on, back through deep time. You build complexity via an extremely long chain of tiny, plausible steps, each step favored by selection. It's a continuous path, not a miracle leap.
Let's look at some real-world examples. Bat sonar, echolocation, that seems like an engineering marvel.
It absolutely is. Using high-frequency sound to navigate and hunt in pitch blackness. It's remarkably similar to human radar or sonar. And different bats have evolved different twists on it, like the Rosetta's fruit bats clicking their tongues instead of using their larynx. Incredible diversity.
But faces real engineering challenges, right? Like sound being too loud.
That's a huge one, the loud pulse dilemma. The outgoing pulse has to be incredibly loud, almost deafening, to get a detectable echo back from, say, a tiny insect far away.
But if your ears are sensitive enough for the faint echo, the loud outgoing pulse would damage them.
Exactly. It's a basic physics problem. So how did evolution solve it? Bats have discovered some ingenious solutions through selection.
Like changing the pitch.
Yeah. Many use frequency modulated, or FM calls those wolf whistle cries, sweeping down in pitch. Unlike human chirp radar, bats seem to use this mainly to tell echoes apart. An echo from further away arrives later, and because the pitch is sweeping downwards, that later echo will actually be higher in pitch than an echo from something closer.
So pitch tells them distance, roughly.
It gives them relative distance information, yeah. Another brilliant trick uses the Doppler shift the ambulance effect.
Where the pitch changes based on movement.
Right. Bats use a double Doppler shift, caused by their movement and the target's movement, to calculate the precise relative speed. Absolutely vital for snagging a moving insect.
And some bats even adjust their own outgoing pitch.
The horseshoe bats, yes. It's amazing. They constantly tweak their outgoing hoot's pitch, specifically to keep the returning echo pitch perfectly constant, right at the frequency their ears are most sensitive to.
So they listen for the constant echo, but get speed info from how much they had to change their own call.
Exactly. It's incredibly sophisticated, real-time auditory processing. We're still trying to replicate that kind of thing effectively in our own technology.
And what about all the noise? Millions of bats in a cave.
Jamming avoidance. There must be a deafening chaos of ultrasound in there. While tweaking frequencies might play a small part, they must have evolved incredibly sophisticated ways to filter out the noise and focus on their own echoes over millions of years. It's a testament to a long co-evolutionary process.
Now, it seems counterintuitive, but you mentioned imperfections can be stronger evidence for evolution than perfection. Gould's panda's thumb.
That's a really powerful insight. It shifts the focus. Consider flatfish. You've got skates and raised shark relatives. They're flat, symmetrical, lying on their bellies. Makes sense.
Yeah, seems logical.
But then you have bony flatfish place, sole, halibut. Their ancestors were normal, upright, vertically flattened fish like herring. To become bottom dwellers, they had to lie on their side,
And twist their heads.
completely twist their skulls during development. So one eye literally migrates across the top of the head to join the other eye on the upward-facing side.
That sounds bizarre, almost like a mistake.
It looks like a monstrosity, as Dawkins puts it. No sensible engineer designing from scratch would do that. But it's crystal clear evidence of evolution tinkering, modifying an existing body plan step by step, rather than designing optimally from a blank slate. It's history made visible.
And the vertebrate retina, that's another imperfect example.
A classic one. Logically, you'd put the light-sensitive photocells facing the incoming light, with the wires leading neatly away behind them.
Makes sense, like a camera sensor.
But in all vertebrates, us included, the photocells point backwards, away from the light. The nerve fibers run over the surface of the retina, creating a blind spot where they bundle together and dive through to form the optic nerve.
So light has to pass through all the wiring first. That seems inefficient.
It seems inelegant, certainly, from an engineering viewpoint. It's a historical legacy, a quirk retained because evolution builds on what's already there. It wouldn't happen in an intelligently designed system starting fresh, but it makes perfect sense as a product of contingent step-by-step modification. It's a fossil embedded in our own eyes.
Okay, let's switch to convergent evolution. This is where unrelated species end up looking or acting remarkably similar, right?
Exactly. Solving similar problems in similar environments often leads to similar solutions, even from totally different starting points. It's a fantastic demonstration of selection's power.
Like those electric fish.
Perfect example. In South America and Africa, completely unrelated groups of fish living in murky, muddy waters independently evolved the ability to generate electric fields and sense disturbances in them to navigate and find prey. Vision is useless there.
And they even look similar.
Remarkably so. Both groups evolved rigid bodies better for stable electric fields and use a long single fin for propulsion. Interestingly, one group uses a fin along its back, the other along its belly. Different details, same overall solution driven by the environment.
And this happens with bigger animals too, South American herbivores.
Oh yeah. When South America was an isolated island continent for millions of years, it evolved its own unique megafauna. Animals filling niches similar to rhinos, elephants, camels elsewhere. Some even evolved trunks independently.
Wow.
But the really stunning example Dawkins highlights are the latopterns, an extinct group of South American hoofed mammals. Their legs became almost unbelievably similar to horses losing side toes, enlarging the middle toe, developing a hoof.
But they weren't related to horses at all.
Utterly unrelated. It powerfully shows that grassland life is much the same the world over. Similar pressures, similar solutions, even from different evolutionary stock.
And the same for predators. Marsupial wolves.
Absolutely. We know old world hunters like wolves and big cats, but Australia and South America had marsupial equivalents filling those roles. The thylacine, the Tasmanian wolf, tragically extinct, now looked astonishingly like a dog or wolf in old films. Only subtle skeletal things. And being a marsupial gave it away.
It's kind of sad thinking about these parallel evolutionary paths that got cut short.
It is quite moving, yeah. To contemplate this creature, so similar yet so different, evolving independently on the other side of the world, it hammers home how function often dictates form under selection.
And convergence goes beyond just body shape, into habits and social structures.
Definitely. Think moles. The marsupial mole in Australia looks and behaves almost exactly like the placental moles we know elsewhere, even down to the fur texture. And anteaters, you've got the pouched Myrmecobius and the egg-laying echidna in Australia converging with the placental giant anteater in South America. All evolved, long snouts, sticky tongues, powerful claws for digging into ant nests.
Even insects, termites and ants.
That's one of the most striking convergences. Termites are basically social cockroaches. Ants are related to wasps and bees, totally different origins.
But they ended up so similar socially.
Incredibly similar. Huge colonies, sterile workers, winged reproductives, often huge egg-laying queens, specialized soldier castes, though using different weapons, like ant jaws versus termite chemical sprayers. And both groups independently invented fungus farming, cultivating fungal gardens underground for food.
Amazing. And those army ants and driver ants, the wandering hordes.
Another fantastic convergence, the legionary habit. African driver ants and New World army ants aren't closely related, but both evolved this nomadic lifestyle. Massive armies constantly on the move, carrying the queen and brood with them, raiding everything in their path.
They have fearsome reputations, right?
Terrifying reputations, stories of villages being evacuated. But as Dawkins notes, quoting E.O. Wilson, Their actual speed is pretty slow, maybe a meter every 3 minutes. The real awe isn't the horror movie aspect, but the sheer strangeness and wonder of these incredibly complex, self-organized societies.
You saw them yourself.
I did, in Panama. It's unforgettable.
Yeah.
Like a living river of ants, crackling, flowing. And when they stop, they form a living bivouac, a boiling peristaltic ball of workers protecting the queen inside.
The queen being the central repository.
Exactly, the central data bank, the repository, the master DNA. The soldiers are guarding the very instructions that created them and told them to guard. It's a powerful image for thinking about genes as instructions, driving behavior for their own replication.
Okay, thinking about these complex systems inevitably brings up probability and miracles. How should we think about a miracle scientifically?
Right. In this context, a miracle isn't supernatural. It's just an event that happens but is exceedingly surprising because its probability is incredibly low.
Like a statue waving.
Exactly. If a marble statue waved, we'd call it a miracle. Not because physics was violated, but because the odds of all those marble atoms randomly moving in coordination like that are astronomically, vanishingly small. Calculable, maybe, but staggeringly improbable based on everything we know. It's just way out on the tail end of the probability curve.
And our intuition about probability is pretty bad, especially with big numbers and long times.
Hopelessly bad, really.
Hmm.
Our brains evolved to handle everyday scales, our body size, our lifespan, small coincidences. We just aren't wired to intuitively grasp geological time, millions, billions of years, or the truly astronomical numbers involved in combinatorial possibilities.
That's like trying to visualize the national debt.
Something like that, yeah. Imagine a scale of improbability. Certainty at one end, sun rising.
Mm-hmm.
Then maybe rolling double sixes, 1 in 36. A perfect bridge hand that's 1 delian. A 1 followed by 27 zeros, roughly.
Okay.
The marble statue waving, it's way, way out there, measured in maybe gigadelians or more.
Yeah.
But it is on the spectrum. Our subjective spotlight of what feels intuitively possible is just incredibly narrow. We can't really feel the difference between extremely improbable and utterly impossible.
So the monkey typing Shakespeare, methinks it is like a weasel. The odds are insane. 10 to the 40th power against.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Calculable. But Dawkins argues it's quantitatively too great to be part of a theory of what actually happens. Why?
Okay.
Because you couldn't physically assemble enough monkeys and typewriters or give them enough time within the age of the universe to make that chance event even remotely likely. It crosses a threshold into practical impossibility.
Okay, so this brings us to the origin of life. How much improbability, how much luck are we allowed to assume happened just once?
That's the core question. And the answer depends entirely on the number of opportunities. How many potential trials were there?
Across the universe.
Exactly. This is where the sheer scale of the cosmos comes in. We need to think about the ration of luck we're allowed.
So define SGP, spontaneous generation probability.
Right. That's the probability of life arising spontaneously on any given randomly chosen suitable planet. If that probability is incredibly low, say 1 in a billion, we'd never expect to see it happen in a lab.
But if life only had to happen once in the entire universe?
Then we're potentially allowed to postulate a very large amount of luck. Because think about the number of potential Heaths out there, the number of planets. Estimates are staggering, maybe 100 billion potentially suitable planets just in the observable universe.
So that huge universe number sets the upper limit on our luck allowance.
Precisely. An event that's fantastically improbable on one planet becomes plausible, maybe even likely, if you have 100 billion planets where it could happen. It dramatically changes the odds.
It's like having a lottery ticket for every person on Earth versus having just one.
A good analogy. So we have this ration of luck to spend. If we assume the origin of life itself used up almost all that luck, meaning it was a fantastically improbable fluke, then subsequent steps, like evolving intelligence, must have been relatively easy, almost inevitable once life got going.
Conversely, if intelligence is the really hard, improbable part,
then the origin of life itself must be pretty common, almost inevitable on suitable planets. We can't have both being supremely lucky. And if we didn't use up all our luck, well, then maybe life exists elsewhere too.
But the scientific goal isn't just to use the maximum luck allowed, right? It's to find the most probable origin story.
Exactly. Dawkins' hunch, and that of many scientists, is that we probably won't need that enormous ration of luck. The search is for theories of a biogenesis life's origin that are as plausible, as probable as possible. Even if probable here still means unlikely by everyday standards, we're looking for relatively probable ways cumulative selection could have gotten started.
And one really interesting, though maybe speculative idea for how that might have happened involves clay.
A.G. Karen Smith's clay hypothesis, yeah, that's fascinating. He proposed that maybe the very first replicators weren't complex organic molecules like RNA or DNA, which seem quite fragile and hard to form spontaneously. Maybe they were simpler, more robust inorganic things, like clay crystals.
How could clay replicate?
Well, crystals grow, obviously, in the right conditions. They can be seeded by existing fragments. Karen Smith imagines a scenario. Imagine a substance that can crystallize in two forms, say, flat flakes versus chunky blocks. Drop seeds of both into a solution. They grow, maybe break apart, seeding more crystals of their own kind.
Okay.
Now, if one type happens to grow faster or break more easily or is more stable, you've got a very basic form of natural selection right there.
Yeah.
The key question is, do real crystals have flaws or patterns that can be inherited when they break and reseed?
Like a primitive form of heredity in crystal defects.
That's the idea. Clay crystals have layered structures. Imperfections in one layer might potentially influence the pattern of imperfections in the next layer as it grows. If tiny fragments break off, carrying that pattern of flaws, and seed new crystals, you've got a way to pass on information, however crudely. It's abstract genetic information stored in crystal structure.
But just replicating isn't enough for evolution, is it? You need power.
Right. The replicator needs to influence its own chances of being replicated. For early crystals, maybe this was super simple. Perhaps some variants were stickier and clumped together better, or their shape slightly altered water flow.
Altered water flow. How would that help?
Imagine a type of clay dust whose crystals, when settled in a stream, inadvertently cause the water to slow down slightly, maybe forming tiny dams or pools. This makes it easier for more of that same type of clay to settle out of the water in that location.
So the clay changes its environment to favor its own deposition.
Exactly. It creates a simple life cycle. The dust, the genes, carries instructions, the crystal properties, for damming streams, which leads to more clay being laid down, which eventually dries, cracks, and releases more dust to infect new streams. It's a feedback loop favoring that type of crystal.
So the crystal's properties are like its phenotype, affecting its survival.
In a very basic sense, yes. And the next speculative step is, what if these successful crystal lineages started to catalyze the formation of other substances, maybe simple organic molecules?
Molecules that help the crystals replicate even better.
Perhaps. These organic molecules would be like primitive tools or phenotypes used by the crystal genes. Maybe they help to bind the clay or protect it or speed up some reaction. They weren't replicating themselves yet, just assisting the crystals.
And eventually, organic molecules like RNA took over.
That's the hypothesis. Maybe RNA initially just coated the clay or helped structurally. But RNA, or something like it, has this amazing property. It can become self-replicating. Once that happened, these organic replicators were likely so much more efficient at storing and copying information than the clunky clay crystals.
They outcompeted them.
Completely took over. The mineral replicators were then just cast aside like worn-out scaffolding. All modern life, with its universal drRNA code, descends from these later, more efficient organic replicators. The clay was perhaps just the initial bootstrap.
Okay, so that's a glimpse of how cumulative selection might have started. Now, how does it actually build complexity? It's not just about filtering things out, right?
No, that's a common misconception. Selection prunes, yes, but mutation adds variation. Together they construct. It's additive, recursive. A key mechanism is the evolution of co-adapted genotypes.
Co-adapted genotypes, meaning genes working together.
Exactly. Think about how an embryo develops. It's not one gene doing one thing. Thousands of genes interact in complex networks. Crucially, for any single gene, its most important environment isn't just the outside world. It's all the other genes present in the same body.
So genes get selected for how well they cooperate.
Precisely. They're selected for their ability to work well with the prevailing genetic team. Imagine two ways to make a vital chemical, each needing different enzymes, and thus genes. If a population happens to have more genes suited for pathway A, the new mutations that enhance pathway A or are compatible with its other genes will be favored.
It becomes self-reinforcing.
Very much so. You start building a team of genes, genes for meat eating. Sharp teeth, strong jaws, efficient protein digestion enzymes. They all get favored together because they work well together. Teams of genes evolve collectively.
And the number of genes in these teams increases over time.
Generally, yes. Complex animals and plants have far more genes than simple bacteria. Processes like gene duplication, basically copying a gene file, allow one copy to keep doing the old job, while the other is free to mutate and potentially take on a new related function.
And sometimes entire organisms join forces, like the origin of our own cells.
Lynn Margulis's theory of endosymbiosis, now widely accepted, it explains the origin of the eukaryotic cell. All cells, except bacteria. Those little powerhouses in our cells, mitochondria and the chloroplasts in plant cells, they have their own DNA.
They used to be separate bacteria.
The theory is, yes, billions of years ago. They were engulfed by or formed a partnership with another primitive cell. It was mutually beneficial. Maybe the engulfed bacterium provided energy, the host provided protection. Over vast time, they became completely interdependent, inseparable.
And the mitochondrial DNA tracing ancestry through the female line is evidence for that.
For one strong piece, yes. It points back to that ancient bacterial ancestor that became the mitochondrion. It's a cooperation on a grand scale.
Another major driver of complexity, evolutionary arms races. This is different from just adapting to, say, the weather.
Fundamentally different. Weather changes, yes, but it doesn't actively try to get worse for you. Living enemies, predators, prey, parasites, they're also evolving, constantly improving their own equipment. So over evolutionary time, your enemies tend to get steadily more hostile or better at escaping.
Because they're also under selection pressure.
Exactly. This leads to Lee Van Valen's brilliant idea, the Red Queen effect.
From Alice in Wonderland, running just to stay in the same place.
Precisely. In evolution, it means you see progressive improvement in equipment. Cheetahs get faster, gazelles get more agile, but not necessarily an increase in success rate. If both sides improve equally, the cheetah still catches roughly the same proportion of gazelles. They're just doing it at a higher level of performance.
But these arms races, especially when they're asymmetrical, they drive real sophistication.
Hugely. Think predator versus prey, or parasite versus host. One side develops a new weapon or defense. The other side evolves a countermeasure. It's this one-to-one, point-for-point basis of adaptation and counter-adaptation that leads to incredible complexity.
Like the bats and moths again?
Perfect example. Bats evolve sophisticated sonar, moths evolve ears tuned to bat frequencies or jamming techniques. It's a technological arms race played out over millions of years. Dawkins argues that an enormous number of detailed facts about animals make sense only when we remember that they are the end products of long and bitter arms races.
What about other runaway processes, like the human brain's expansion? How do we even measure braininess fairly across species?
Good question. Bigger animals need bigger brains just to run bigger bodies, so simple size isn't the answer. The best measure we have is Harry Jerrison's encephalization quotient, or EQ.
EQ? How does that work?
It basically calculates how much larger or smaller an animal's brain is compared to what you'd expect for an animal of its body size, typically compared to other mammals. It uses logarithms to handle the scaling effects. Humans have an EQ around 7 times like. Our brains are 7 times bigger than expected for a mammal our size. Hippos are down around 0.3. It's a proxy for extra computing power beyond basic bodily functions.
And looking at fossils, EQ has generally increased over time.
Jerrison's work reconstructing fossil brain sizes from skulls showed exactly that. Brains tended to get bigger over millions of years, and interestingly, carnivores usually had higher EQs than the herbivores they preyed upon at the same time. But later herbivores had higher EQs than earlier ones, and later carnivores higher still.
Suggesting arms races again, visible in brain size.
It looks very much like a series of restarting brain power arms races playing out in the fossil record, constantly escalating cognitive abilities.
This connects to positive feedback loops, like R.A. Fisher's idea about sexual selection, peacock tails.
Exactly. Positive feedback, where a change triggers more of the same change, leading to spirals. Fisher's theory of runaway sexual selection is the classic example. Think peacock trains or widowbird tails. Male ornamentation and female preference for it can reinforce each other, escalating with ever-increasing speed.
How does that work if a slightly longer tail makes a male more attractive?
Then females who prefer longer tails will have sons with longer tails who are attractive and daughters who prefer longer tails. So the preference and the trait spread together. Even if the longer tail is actually slightly bad for survival, harder to fly, easier for predators to spot, the mating advantage can outweigh it.
So it's about fashion, catering to what the majority of females happen to prefer.
Pretty much. If a preference, maybe initially arbitrary, reaches a certain frequency, becomes self-reinforcing. Males have to have the fashionable trait to compete, even if it's costly. The enormous benefits of mating success, like getting a harem, can drive the trait to extremes.
Is the green beard effect related to this?
It's a conceptual illustration of the same underlying principle. Genes favoring copies of themselves. The hypothetical green beard gene makes you grow a green beard. A and D makes you nice to others with green beards.
So the gene helps itself spread by making its carriers cooperate.
Right. While a literal green beard gene is unlikely, kin selection being altruistic to relatives who likely share your genes works on a similar, though less specific principle. Genes for helping kin are indirectly helping copies of themselves.
The key is this self-reinforcement once a slight imbalance occurs.
Yes. Unto everyone that hath shall be given. Once a trend starts, positive feedback can amplify it dramatically. Random beginnings become locked in and escalate.
And this might explain the rapid human brain expansion, tripling in size in just 3 million years.
It's a plausible analogy. Maybe braininess itself became sexually attractive, or maybe there was a feedback loop involving language, tool use, and social complexity. Whatever the driver, it looks like an explosive spiral. But remember, even that rapid change was gradual generation by generation, maybe 0.01 cc added per generation. Still slow on a human timescale, but lightning fast geologically.
And we see similar accelerating trends in human culture, technology.
Definitely. Quasi-evolutionary trends. Look at transport speed, computing power, sound reproduction quality. There are undeniable, measurable trends of improvement in function over time, driven by invention, competition, and demand. Not biological evolution, but a similar pattern of cumulative, often accelerating change.
Language evolution, too.
A really strong analogy. Languages diverge, change, borrow words like genes, island hopping, show trends. You can even build family trees of languages, measure their distance, like molecular biologists measure genetic distance.
And pop charts, bestseller lists. Is that runaway selection, too?
Dawkins makes that analogy strongly. Often, popularity itself becomes the driving force. A song or book hits a critical mass, and then positive feedback takes over. People buy it because other people are buying it. It takes off.
So initial success might be partly arbitrary, but then it snowballs.
Exactly. It shows how these self-reinforcing dynamics can lead to exponential growth, driven more by popularity feedback than just intrinsic quality. A powerful parallel for how traits could explode in frequency in evolution once a positive feedback loop gets going.
Okay, let's tackle some common myths about evolution's pace. People hear about sudden bursts and think it means giant leaps, right? Saltationism.
That confusion comes up a lot, especially with the Cambrian explosion. Around 600 million years ago, suddenly you see all these complex invertebrates with shells and skeletons appearing in the fossil record, almost like they were planted there.
But that's not saltation, not instant creation.
No, definitely not. Virtually all evolutionary biologists agreed this represents a major gap in the fossil record before the Cambrian. The ancestors were likely soft-bodied, didn't fossilize well. The explosion is an explosion of fossils, not necessarily an impossibly fast rate of evolution itself.
Yeah.
Both gradualists and punctuationists agree on this as not evidence against Darwinism.
And why is true saltationism big leaps rejected anyway? Fisher's microscope analogy.
Brilliant analogy. Imagine a microscope almost in focus. A tiny random tweak to the knob has maybe a 50-50 chance of improving the focus slightly.
Okay.
But now make a huge random turn of the knob. What happens?
Almost certainly makes it much worse, completely blurry.
Exactly. An existing organism is already highly adapted, finely tuned like the almost focused microscope. Any large random change, a macromutation, is vastly more likely to break something vital than to accidentally improve complex function. Beneficial changes have to be small, incremental adjustments. Boeing 747 macromutations are statistically impossible as drivers of adaptation.
So complex organs have to be built step by step through cumulative selection.
That's the only way it works, probabilistically.
And this relates to the gaps in the fossil record when new species appear.
Yes. The standard view of speciation often involves geographic isolation. A population gets split, say by a mountain range or a river. The isolated group evolves separately, adapting to its local conditions or just drifting genetically.
Until it becomes a new species, unable to interbreed with the original population.
Right. Now, imagine you're digging fossils in the original homeland. You won't see the gradual change happening there. You'll see the ancestral species, then, perhaps quite abruptly, the new species appears.
Because it evolved elsewhere and then migrated back?
Exactly. The gap in the local record is actually expected under this model. It reflects the geography of speciation.
It's ironic a truly perfect fossil record would make classification harder.
Much harder. If we had fossils of every single intermediate organism that ever lived, drawing sharp lines between species or even between major groups like reptiles and mammals, would be almost impossible. It would be one continuous blur. Our clear distinctions today exist precisely because the intermediates are mostly extinct.
What about periods where species seem not to change? Stasis. That's what the punctuationists highlighted.
Eldridge and Gold, yes. Their theory of punctuated equilibria, again, they are not saltationists. They believe evolution happens gradually, but that the pattern is often long periods of stability, stasis, in widespread species, punctuated by relatively brief bursts of rapid, gradual change occurring during speciation events in small, isolated populations. Their big contribution was forcing people to take stasis seriously.
And the coelacanth is the poster child for stasis.
Absolutely stunning example. A fish thought extinct for 65 million years, found alive in 1938, and it looks almost identical to fossils 250 million years old. It's barely changed. A true living fossil.
Why would a species stay the same for so long?
Couple of main ideas. One, maybe it just found a very stable niche, like the deep sea, where conditions didn't change much, and it was already well adapted. No pressure to evolve, maybe avoided intense arms races.
Or maybe species actively resist change.
Some punctuationists suggested that, maybe some internal genetic constraint, but the evidence from artificial selection seems to argue against strong intrinsic resistance. When we breed dogs or pigeons or corn, they respond readily to selection, often dramatically. Limits usually come from running out of genetic variation, not from the organism actively fighting change.
It's crucial to stress these are debates within evolutionary biology, right? Not challenges to it.
Absolutely vital point. Unfortunately, creationists often seize on these nuanced scientific discussions about tempo and mode as if they signify a collapse of Darwinism itself. Nothing could be further from the truth. These debates are signs of a healthy, active science refining its understanding.
Let's talk taxonomy. Why is classifying life different from classifying, say, books?
Well, classifying books in a library is about convenience. You can group them by subject, author, size, color, whatever works best for finding them. There's no single, objectively correct way mandated by the books themselves. It's arbitrary.
But biological classification isn't arbitrary.
It shouldn't be, because evolution implies there is one true family tree, a unique historical branching pattern connecting all living things. Biological taxonomy aims, or should aim, to reflect that real evolutionary history.
And this tree has a special property, perfect nesting.
Yes. Above the species level, for modern organisms, there are no true intermediates. An animal might look superficially like a blend, like a platypus mammal features, reptile features, but evolutionarily it sits firmly on one branch or another. It is a mammal, albeit a very early branching one. You don't find things that are genuinely halfway between a bird and a mammal today.
Unlike a book that could reasonably fit in 2 library sections.
Exactly. Now, again, this only applies cleanly to modern life because the common ancestors and intermediates linking major groups like birds and mammals are extinct. A complete fossil record would blur those lines.
And molecular data powerfully confirms the single tree of life, the universal genetic code.
It's incredibly powerful evidence. The fact that the dictionary translating DNA codons into amino acids is almost identical across all life, bacteria, archaea, plants, fungi, animals, is stunning proof of a single common ancestor. That code is largely arbitrary. There's no chemical necessity for that specific code. For it to arise independently multiple times with the same assignments is statistically unimaginable.
So the dictionary is the same, but the sentences, the actual gene sequences differ.
Right. And by comparing those differences in DNA or protein sequences, we can measure the genetic distance between any 2 species very precisely. Like comparing histone proteins in cows and peas reveals their degree of evolutionary separation. It allows us to reconstruct the branching patterns of the tree with amazing accuracy.
This has led to different schools of thought in taxonomy.
Broadly, yes. You have phylleticists who explicitly try to reconstruct the evolutionary tree. Within that, cladists focus solely on the branching pattern, which groups share a more recent common ancestor, ignoring how much change occurred along the branches. Traditional evolutionary taxonomists consider both the branching pattern and the amount of divergence.
And then others try to ignore evolution in practice.
Some do. Phoneticists, or numerical taxonomists, measure lots of characters, calculate overall similarity, and cluster organisms based on that, often using computers, without explicitly assuming evolution. Then there are transformed cladists who use cladistic methods for finding branching patterns, but controversially deny that this pattern necessarily reflects evolution. They might apply it to classifying anything, like stones or tools.
a quick mention of species selection, selection acting on whole species.
Right. The idea that species with certain traits, like wide geographic range or maybe faster speciation rate, might persist longer or diversify more than others. It might explain some very long-term trends, like the tendency for horse lineages to increase in body size over millions of years.
But it doesn't explain complex adaptations like eyes.
No, that's driven by selection on individuals and genes. Species selection is generally seen as a much weaker force, more like single-step selection, filtering species, than cumulative selection, building adaptations within species. Fisher did make a rare exception, arguing sexual reproduction itself might persist via species selection, as sexual species can evolve faster and thus avoid extinction better in the long run.
Okay, finally, let's tackle the alternatives often proposed instead of Darwinism. Why does cumulative selection stand out? Let's start with Lamarckism.
Lamarck's idea, the inheritance of acquired characteristics. Use a muscle, it gets stronger, and your kids inherit slightly stronger muscles. Stretch your neck like a giraffe, your offspring gets slightly longer necks.
He believed in evolution, which was important then, but his mechanism was wrong.
Exactly. He thought traits acquired during life could be passed down. It had a certain appeal, suggest progress, self-improvement across generations.
But it had a dark side too. Lysenko in the Soviet Union.
A truly chilling example. Lysenko rejected Mendelian genetics and forced Soviet agriculture to adopt Lamarckian ideas, leading to disastrous famines and the persecution, even execution, of brilliant geneticists who knew he was wrong. A terrifying lesson about ideology overriding science.
And scientifically, Lamarckism is just wrong.
Devastatingly refuted. First, acquired traits just aren't inherited in that way. Getting a tan doesn't change the genes in your sperm or eggs. Second, it fundamentally clashes with how development works. The recipe model, epigenetics, changes to the finished cake, the body. Don't rewrite the recipe book, the genes.
And even if it could happen, it wouldn't explain complex adaptations.
No, for two reasons. One, it sort of piggybacks on Darwinism. The acquired trait, like learning something useful, has to be advantageous first to be acquired, which needs explaining. Two, it's just too crude. How does use and disuse sculpt something as intricate as an eye lens or an iris mechanism? It just can't. Lamarckism is not a viable alternative.
What about other ideas? Neutralism, random drift of mutations.
Kimura's neutral theory is important, but it explains molecular changes that are invisible to selection changes that don't affect function. It's not a rival theory for explaining adaptive evolution, how eyes or wings evolve. It explains the background noise of molecular change, not the adaptive signal.
Mutationism. The idea that mutation directs evolution, not selection.
That's basically saying evolution has an inbuilt tendency to mutate in beneficial directions, which sounds mystical because there's no known mechanism for that. If mutations are random with respect to advantage, you need selection to provide the direction towards improvement. Mutationism alone leads nowhere useful.
And molecular drive. Gabriel Dover's idea.
This one's fascinatingly counterintuitive. It suggests random changes happen first, and then the species somehow finds an environment or way of life where that random change happens to be useful.
Like evolving infrared eyes by chance and then finding a niche for them?
Sort of, yes. But the numbers just kill it. Dawkins uses the large numbers argument again. If an eye needs, say, 1,000 steps, and each is a random choice, you'd need 2 to the power of 1,000 possible pre-existing environments waiting for every random outcome. That number is vastly larger than the number of atoms in the universe. It's cloud cuckooism.
It's backwards logic, requiring infinite luck in finding suitable environments.
Precisely. Natural selection avoids this because it prunes the tree of possibilities constantly. It filters out the non-viable branches, like eyes on your feet, at each step, finding a path through the tiny fraction of viable options. It doesn't rely on environments magically appearing to suit random mutations.
Which leaves us with divine intervention.
The ultimate non-explanation, really. Instantaneous creation is out, scientifically. So the fallback is often guided evolution, God nudging things along at key points.
But the problem there is,
if you're trying to explain organized complexity, simply invoking an even more complex designer doesn't solve anything. It just pushes the problem back. Where did the designer come from? If you allow yourself to start with unexplained complexity, the designer, why not just start with unexplained life? It's circular.
So design needs an explanation, not just a more complex designer assumed.
Exactly. So divine creation, guided or instant, joins Lamarckism, mutationism, molecular drive. They all seem like alternatives on the surface, but they don't actually offer a workable mechanism for generating adaptive complexity from simplicity.
Which leaves Darwin's cumulative selection standing.
It's the only theory we know of that is, in principle, capable of explaining the existence of organized complexity. It solves Paley's watch problem with a blind natural process.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered a huge amount of ground in this deep dive. We've really tried to unpack this core idea, cumulative selection, as the powerful yet simple explanation for all the apparent design in life.
From intricate organs like eyes and bat sonar to the dynamics of arms races, even the seemingly explosive patterns in the fossil record. It all fits within this framework, a framework that works naturally, consistent with physics, without needing any foresight or plan.
And understanding this, hopefully for you listening, isn't just about learning biological facts. It's really about a potential shift in perspective.
A unifying way to look at the sheer diversity and complexity of life. Recognizing that blind watchmaker process constantly at work, building complexity incrementally over unimaginable stretches of time.
So here's a final thought to chew on. If the Red Queen effect means predators and prey run faster and faster just to stay in the same place relative to each other, what about us? Our own technological races, societal competitions?
Are we just constantly running faster on a treadmill, improving our equipment, but not necessarily our overall success or well-being? Or does human consciousness, our ability to actually plan and reflect, offer a way to break free from that relentless Red Queen race in a way biological evolution can't?
Something to ponder. What aspect of how evolution builds complexity stands out most to you?
We really encourage you to look at the world around you now, maybe with slightly different eyes. See the design, but appreciate the astonishing, unguided, cumulative process, the blind watchmaker that actually brought it all into being over billions of years. The wonder isn't lost. If anything, it's magnified.